The water was the color of guilt, a murky, chlorinated blue that held more secrets than the surface of the moon, and it was there, in the deep end of the public pool, that my past and my future collided in a tangle of panic and skin. The girl wrapped around me like a drowning vine was not just any girl, she was Naomi, the younger sister of the woman I had loved and lost, and her legs were locked around my waist with a grip that felt like a plea. The moment her fingers dug into my shoulders, I felt the ghost of a different embrace, a familiar ghost that I had spent the last 3 years trying to drown in late nights and cheap whiskey. Every ripple in the pool seemed to amplify the quiet roar in my ears as I realized that I wasn't just holding her up, I was holding onto the last tangible piece of a life I had ruined, and I had no idea if I was strong enough to keep either of us from sinking. If you believe in second chances, in the quiet power of kindness that can mend even the most shattered of hearts, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to this channel right now. The story began, as most catastrophic ones do, with a phone call I shouldn't have answered. My name is Ethan, and I had spent my 20s building walls around myself, brick by brick, mortar made of regret and regret alone. I was a firefighter in a small town just outside of Austin, Texas, a job that demanded I run into burning buildings while my personal life smoldered in the ash of my own poor decisions. My biggest failure had a name, Audrey. She was the love of my life, the kind of woman who made the sun seem dimmer when she left the room. I had met her in high school, and we had been a pair of shooting stars, bound for a glorious collision that we thought would end in a white picket fence and a golden retriever. Instead, I crashed us into a wall of my own making, infidelity born of insecurity and a crippling fear that I didn't deserve happiness. I broke her heart in the most brutal way imaginable, and she took the shattered pieces and moved to California. I stayed, steeped in my own stagnation, watching her life flourish from a distance on social media, a silent spectator to my own destruction. Naomi was a different creature entirely. Where Audrey was a roaring campfire, bright and warm, Naomi was a cool, clear stream. At 24, she was a marine biologist with a passion for the ocean that felt both naive and profoundly wise. She was also Audrey's opposite in nearly every way, shorter, with hair the color of dark honey instead of Audrey's deep auburn, and a laugh that sounded like wind chimes rather than Audrey's throaty, confident chuckle. I had avoided her for years, seeing her as a painful reminder, a funhouse mirror reflection of the woman I'd lost. But when Audrey called me, desperate and far away, asking me to teach Naomi how to swim properly before a big research trip in the Florida Keys, I couldn't say no. It wasn't for Audrey, I told myself. It was for Naomi. It was the right thing to do. It was a way to pay a debt that could never be repaid. The first lesson was a disaster of forced politeness and stilted conversation, but the second lesson was where the real story began. The second lesson started with a lie I told myself: I was in control. The water was a refuge for me, a place where my muscles knew what to do even when my mind was a mess of static. Naomi, however, was a bundle of nervous energy, a sparrow hopping around the edge of a vast, terrifying sky. She had the basics down, but panic would seize her the moment she couldn't feel the solidity of the pool floor beneath her feet. She wanted to conquer the deep end, and I, with a misplaced sense of confidence, decided to help her. I had her hold onto the edge while I guided her legs, showing her the scissor kick motion. The chlorine was sharp in my nostrils, mixing with the faint scent of her coconut shampoo, a scent that was so wholly innocent it made my chest ache. She was wearing a simple, dark blue one-piece, and her focus was so absolute that it was almost painful to watch. She was trying so hard, her brow furrowed in concentration, and in that moment, I didn't see Audrey's sister. I saw a young woman determined to face her fears, and I admired her for it. Then, she let go of the edge. It happened in a flash. Her arms started pinwheeling, her eyes went wide, and a small, terrified gasp escaped her lips. Instinct took over, and I lunged forward, my hands finding her waist. But the momentum was off, my foot slipped on the slick pool floor, and we both plunged beneath the surface. The world became a swirl of blue and green, the muffled roar of water filling my ears. When I kicked us back up, breaking the surface with a gasp, I found myself in the deep end. Naomi was panicked, thrashing, her arms flailing, and in her blind instinct to survive, she did the only thing she could. Her legs came up and wrapped around my torso, her arms clamping around my neck like a vice. She couldn't touch bottom, and I was her only anchor. In that breathless, terrifying moment, time seemed to slow down. The roar of the pool, the shouts of children in the distance, the hum of the filtration system, it all faded into a distant hum. It was just me, the water, and the girl clinging to me for dear life. She was trembling, her face buried in the crook of my neck, and I could feel the frantic thump of her heart against my chest, a wild, panicked rhythm that synced with my own. My hands were spread wide on her back, trying to reassure her, to tell her she was safe. The water lapped at our chins, and I was acutely aware of the startling intimacy of the position. Her legs were wrapped around me, her breath was hot against my skin, and for a terrifying second, I wasn't thinking about survival, I was thinking about the past. I was thinking about the last time I held someone like this, the way Audrey used to curl into me after a fight, seeking comfort and giving it all at once. This was not comfort, this was desperation, and yet, it stirred something long dormant in my chest, a cocktail of guilt, tenderness, and a confusing, new kind of warmth. I started to murmur to her, my voice low and steady in the cacophony of her panic. Hey, it's okay. You're okay. You're safe, Naomi. I've got you. I said her name, and it felt like a key turning in a rusty lock. It was a name I had never spoken with such softness before. I kept talking, telling her to breathe, to just listen to my voice, to look at my face. I won't let you go, I promised, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. Slowly, her death grip on my neck loosened, and she pulled back just enough to look into my eyes. There were tears welling in her own, but there was also a flood of relief. She was looking at me, not as her sister's ex-boyfriend, not as a stranger, but as the person who was holding her up, literally and figuratively. The panic in her eyes subsided, replaced by a raw vulnerability that cut straight through the scar tissue around my heart. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice shaky. I couldn't touch. I just shook my head, my thumb tracing a small, soothing circle on her back, a gesture so intimate it surprised me. It's okay, I said again. We're going to do this differently. We're going to take it slow. The change was palpable. The desperate clinging turned into a more secure, mutual embrace. I loosened my grip, letting her know she wasn't a prisoner, and she slowly began to use her legs, not to grip me, but to tread water. It was a small victory, but it was ours. I guided her, my hands on her hips, helping her find a rhythm, showing her how to trust the water, and more importantly, how to trust me. The sun started to dip, painting the sky in shades of orange and lavender, the light filtering through the windows of the pool enclosure. The stark reality of the situation hit me as I swam with her, the water holding us both. This was the sister of the woman I had betrayed, and yet, the betrayal seemed to belong to another lifetime. Naomi was her own person, with her own fears and her own story, and in helping her, I was writing a new chapter of my own. This was the first time I had felt a sense of purpose, a clear direction, since I had last held Audrey. I was no longer running from my past. I was anchoring myself to a present moment that was filled with possibility. The struggle wasn't just about swimming anymore, it was about learning to forgive myself and allowing myself to care for someone again, even if it was in the most unconventional way. By the time the lesson ended, the tension had completely dissolved. We sat at the edge of the pool, our feet dangling in the cooling water, and we talked for an hour about everything and nothing. She talked about her research, her love for sea turtles, her fear of the unknown. I talked about the firehouse, the camaraderie, and the loneliness of coming home to an empty house. We were both looking for a way to feel less alone in the world, and in the shimmering reflection of the pool water, we found a kindred spirit. As the darkness began to claim the sky, she stood up, wrapped a towel around herself, and looked at me with a soft, genuine smile. Thank you, Ethan, she said, her voice carrying a weight far heavier than gratitude. I couldn't have done it without you. I just nodded, my throat tight. I knew then that this was a pivotal moment, a crossroads where the road of my past intersected with a new, uncharted path. The simple act of teaching her to swim had taught me how to breathe again, how to feel the sun on my face after a long, dark night. It was a lesson in grace, a reminder that salvation sometimes comes in the most unexpected packages, a pair of legs wrapped around you in a moment of panic, and a heart open enough to receive a second chance. If this story has touched your heart, if you believe that even the most broken among us can find a way to mend, I ask you to not just watch, but to engage. Hit that like button, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and leave a comment telling me about a moment in your life where an unexpected connection changed everything. The weight of it all descended on me as I drove home, the memory of her warmth lingering on my skin. I realized that my love for Audrey had been a wildfire, destructive and passionate, burning everything in its path. What I felt for Naomi was something different. It was a gentle, life-giving rain, washing away the ash and nurturing the soil for new growth. It wasn't a romantic love, not yet, but it was a profound, soul-deep connection. I had given her a swim lesson, and in return, she had given me something I had lost a long time ago, hope. I pulled over to the side of the road, the golden light of a Texas sunset filling my truck, and I finally allowed myself to let go of the guilt. I let the memory of Audrey rest in peace, and I looked forward to the possibility of a tomorrow where I wasn't defined by my worst mistake, but by my capacity to care for someone else. Naomi had been my anchor in the deep end, and I would spend my life trying to be the same for her. Before you leave, I have a special request. In the comments below, just comment saved if you believe that it is never too late to be saved, to change, to love again. Just saved. I want to see it. I want to know that you hear the message in this story. The next weekend, I was back at the pool. Naomi was already there, floating on her back with a confidence that made my heart swell. She saw me, and a smile broke across her face like the first light of dawn. She paddled over to the edge where I stood, and she looked up at me, her eyes clear and bright. "You ready for another lesson?" I asked, my voice thick with emotion. She just grinned, and without a word, she reached up and took my hand. Her grip was warm and sure, and as I slipped into the water beside her, I knew this was just the beginning. The first swim lesson was over, but the real lesson about forgiveness, connection, and the courage to embrace the future had just begun. The water no longer held the ghosts of my past, it held the promise of a new horizon, and I was finally ready to swim toward it. I was ready to live again, and it was all because I gave a swim lesson to my ex's sister, and she couldn't touch bottom and wrapped her legs around me. It was the deepest salvation I had ever known.